Namaskar. Today is the 6th of July, Tuesday, and welcome to Daily Global Insights with Sree and Sree, episode number 197. We have a lot to cover and shall jump straight to global news. In global news, in an astonishing statement, Canadian civil liberties boss says burn it all down as churches are torched across Canada. Harsha Walia is described as a community organizer and campaigner in migrant justice, feminist, anti-capitalist, abolitionist, and anti-imperialist. Welcome to DGI, Sridharji, and your thoughts on what this lady is saying.
Good morning to everybody. Welcome first day back here in United States after the long weekend or the July 4th weekend. Very bright 91 degrees. It's going to be a kicker as we get into this phase of the journey. It's quite astonishing that a person could make such a provocative statement. I believe that she has later apologized, but it is her qualifications that follow eminently describes or aptly describes the persona that we are talking about. Anti-capitalist, abolitionist, anti-imperialist, and those who is fighting for justice, etc. You can fight for every one of this, but to make provocative statements in public is not a very appropriate. Typical characteristics of these liberals, who care two hoops for anything other than what they believe in. It doesn't matter what you believe in, but why should you be antagonistic to others who have their own beliefs? But very poor, and I think it's been condemned across the world, her statement. She's not even clear about her identity, and when you go back and Google, she's from Bahrain, a South Asian resident, South Asia way. So these are some of the questions, but never mind. So we should move on, but it's not a very appropriate statement, coming from the liberal wing of the world.
And China trots out corrupt former Afghan President Hamid Karzai to whine about United States. Widespread corruption and expansion of opium production dominated his tenure prior to his eventual fall. The Bagram airfield commander has complained that the US forces left shutting off electricity without telling anyone by night. Well, first off, what is the China claim that under Karzai things were very corrupt? I thought opium trade has been flourishing in Afghanistan for God knows how long.
China has a point to prove, which is to say that this is the proxy battle that is going on between China and United States. It chooses every theater or every venue and every opportunity to seize its moment. So what does it do as US forces and EU leave Afghanistan? Who do they bring out in the front? They bring out Mr. Hamid Karzai. Hamid Karzai. What does Hamid Karzai say? Well, US forces did not do its job, and now they are leaving, and we are left to the mercy. And it's the most inappropriate. You can see for yourself that US is not a country to be trusted. Along those lines, he has issued a statement. The background is this is the guy who was ousted because of his very corrupt practices.
And Japan is going to extend COVID restrictions for 30 million people until after Olympics. Indonesia's COVID deaths soar as hundreds perish outside hospitals. Japan's number 2 deputy prime minister, Taro Aso, said on Monday that any invasion of Taiwan by Japan would be interpreted, any invasion of Taiwan by China would be interpreted as a threat to Japan. Japan will deploy self-defense forces alongside US forces. So Japan is beginning to, get prepared for an eventual attack by China. Is that how I should read it, sir?
The way we have to read it is that Taiwan is clearly a red zone or a red line. Japan is taking a much more preemptive and proactive approach, and it is saying that any intrusion into Taiwan will be treated by Japan as an invasion into Japan itself. So it will deploy and unleash all its forces to defend the nation of Taiwan. And it is demonstrating in two ways. One, it is providing this type of augmented support in concert with whether the United States is part of it or not, but it continues to tag United States be adjacent to these statements. And if you remember, in the Ashima Island, the U.S. and Japan conducted an exercise of surface-to-air missiles testing, as well as their packed anti-missile batteries, etc., etc. So Japan is making a very clear stand on this. There's another thing that one has to inform. What has happened to Quad? Japan is no longer talking about Quad, or the whole objective of Quad was from one stretch Indonesian into South China Sea, into Taiwan Strait or East China Sea, and then into Pacific. That was the territory by which these four countries, segmented themselves and decided to provide security. So very much it was an integrated architecture of US, Japan, Australia, and India. So Quad has been relegated to the back seat. Now Japan is coming up with these types of statements to defend Taiwan. So it's very clear. And the second thing that also we have to point out is that Japan has been almost every other day supplying the COVID vaccines. Yesterday or today, they supplied another 1.2 million vaccines to Taiwan. There has been spurt in cases. If you recall, Taiwan and Israel were two countries that were flouted as the countries which was able to combat COVID better. Taiwan had almost 0% in the first wave, and in the second wave, now they are caught in the third wave. Israel was very effective in combating it, but again, the cases are on the rise. But let's move from Israel and coming back to Taiwan. So both on the eco front, as well as in the health front, as well as on the security front, it looks like Japan is taking a much more active role in making sure that Taiwan is defended under any cost. The reason, once Taiwan is done, Japan believes Japan is the next target.
Boris Johnson, having made significant progress with vaccinations, has decided to lift all restrictions, including masks. He says we have to learn to live with the pandemic. Excellent thoughts, sir, but you still have to keep looking for all these signs of, whether another one is going to come, third wave, fourth wave. God only knows how many more waves are being held in check. And with a spineless response like in the United States is doing, especially by not being very solidly together with Quad. That's a huge disappointment, because I see in India's TV debates as if Quad is very much alive and active. I think some of them need to wake up and smell the coffee. That's just my take, sir. Please go ahead. And you think that British policy will be taken up by other countries?
Britain derives its confidence from two factors. One factor is 50% of its population is vaccinated with two doses of vaccine. So 50%. 67% of its population has had at least one vaccine. So 17% of the people have had one vaccine, and they're waiting for the second to cross. And then, of course, you continue. I think around the 70%, once you are vaccinated, you cannot keep people, especially in summer. Winter one can understand. Especially in summer, you cannot keep the people inside. There's been a lot of protests against people being, against the shutdowns. So he's saying, okay, fine. Now we are vaccinated. We are reasonably prepared. They're saying, okay, fine. Let's kind of move forward and deal with the situation. Allow people to acclimatize and see whether the herd immunity system begins to take shape, as it has happened in some of the warmer states in the United States. Florida is an example. Texas is an example, where you have seen this herd immunity in conjunction with acclimatization has helped people to combat it better. So I think Boris is following the same principle. But as you rightly said, one has to keep a close watch. Now we have moved from Delta to Lambda. We have a new variant called Lambda variant. So we will see the efficacy and how quickly the contagion spreads under Lambda. We know that under Delta, so we have heard from China that it can very actively spread across, as they have witnessed in their own country.
And Israeli defense officials were checking whether Iranian forces were behind the attack on a cargo ship under partial Israeli ownership. The ship was on its way from Jeddah in Saudi Arabia to the United Arab Emirates. A large fire reported near Tehran, and the background on what caused it remains unclear. The fire broke out in Karaj, south of Tehran, the city where an alleged past attack was a target of a nuclear facility reportedly used to produce centrifuges. Viewers, you'll remember a few days ago we had reported this. So it looks like there is a certain link, and Iran is also being looked at with suspicion if they were the ones who attacked the ship. Sir, these are all tit for tat between Iran and Israel. Is that how you see it too?
Yes, I think Iran is playing both proxy as well as direct, multi-theatrical, attack against Israel. It directly cannot confront Israel, or it confronts through its proxies and through its what you call agents, be it Hamas, be it Hezbollah, be it the people from Gaza. So you have a whole range. So they seem to have targeted. We have had this issue even in the Persian Gulf, the Straits of near Oman. If you remember that a ship was attacked, they tried to seize the ship, both the Korean and the Israeli, which is a Port Liberian. This is a cargo ship which is moving around between Jeddah and UAE that was attacked. So Israel is investigating. It's very clear that there's not going to be a dull moment for the next few months, a few years under the current presidency, because all of these things have begun to pop up, especially because Iran is now in the front and center of negotiations. Part of the world accepts it, part of the world doesn't accept it. IAEA is supposed to visit back again, notwithstanding the fact Iran is unwilling to cooperate. The Swiss people are saying we got to go back. Swiss, Germans, and the Chinese are saying we got to go back and bring Iran to the negotiating table and discuss the sanctions. While that happens, you have these subtle attacks going on around Tehran, where bit by bit some of these facilities are being targeted. We don't know by whom. Sometimes Israel claims, sometimes you don't get any answers. But this is an incident of a fire that took place yesterday.
And let's take a look at US news. Immigration activists call Texas border security efforts an insurrection against the United States. A major Hispanic group, League of the United Latin American Citizens, LULAC, delivered a letter to Biden calling him to block state governors sending National Guard and other officers. Sir, these things don't hold any weight for me. You can start a letterhead in the comfort of your bedroom if you want to and say that you represent a certain interest, and then start putting out business, press statements and so on and so forth. These are all, I'm just stuck by the amount of exaggerated importance some of these organizations give to themselves. You got to really fight it out for some time, establish credibility before you can start claiming these things. I'm just aghast, sir. These progressives, I don't know where their head is. Frankly, I don't know where their head is. I don't know about you, sir. I think US is still not out of this pandemic. We need to regulate who comes in and out. We seem to be able to do that just fine on our airports, but not on the borders.
Well, you have raised a number of issues, ranging from containing the pandemic to controlling the inflow of the surges that's happening across the border, plus the security issues that are adjacent that come with it. And again, you're right that the pandemic has not been conquered. We finished wave 1 very, with lots of damages. Wave 2, we seem to be smothering, but wave 3 is almost imminent here, which is what both Dr. Fauci as well as WHO is warning. And we have been talking about the active cases, which remains a significantly material number, right, on a 34 million. If you have 5 million people still, or 4.8 million people still active, and more people coming in untested, and what they call is shelter in place. It is another word that is called shelter in place. Shelter in place means you can put these people because there's an opportunity to house them. Even in shelter in place, there's been deaths, and there is no question, there's no testing of all these people who are coming in. So, as you rightly point out, there seems to be no rationale other than the only rationale being all these people have to be gushed in conjunction with 11 or 12 million people already here, so you can explode the nation with the people that is for whatever purpose. It's like, unfinished business, but we will do it at any cost, under all circumstances, seems to be their only agenda.
Biden gun and police policies are threatening Democrats' prospects with rising crime and violence across major cities. Across 34 cities, the homicide rates have surged up to 24% in the first quarter of 2021 alone. In New York City, the recent crime waves have triggered discussions around racial justice policing changes. New York has witnessed resignations and early retirement by officers and detectives. The general outcry is keeping the dangerous criminals locked up until justice is dispensed. Moreover, more than 80 shot and 14 fatally injured more than 80 shot and 14 fatally over the July 4th weekend in Chicago. Many amongst them were children. What did they do to deserve this? Sir, where is this country headed?
I think the crime is astronomical, and you can see from the data. The New York issue is the front and center of the mayoral debate that just concluded. Manhattan is flooded with a lot of liberals. The 5 boroughs are. Now, even the liberals are breaking ranks with the progressives and saying, change these policies which came into effect in January 2020. Change the policies. Namely, that you got to have these people, in those who are criminals, give the freedom to the justices, so that these guys who have perpetuated crimes at least can be kept behind bars, away from the society, until such time, the verdicts and judgments happen. And then we'll deal with it as the situation may be, if it's proven guilty or proven innocent, as the case may be. But unleashing them back into the society is not very effective way by which reducing the crime, and that is why the crime is growing. You can't go into Times Square and guarantee that you'll walk out of the Times Square safe anymore. During daytime, evening time, nighttime, doesn't matter what it is. Even the people, innocent people, we had that incident, a guy coming into a Times Square and randomly shooting, and the fellow who was walking with his family in a bike gets injured and admitted to the hospital. So you have a number of these cases propping up just in the heart of many, many important public venues where people flock, especially the tourists. And of course, Chicago, DC, Minneapolis, and so on. You can begin to list the states, but the general uptick in the homicides is a reflection of the prevailing law and order, plus this whole defund police movement and disrespect to the police officers and detectives is become a double whammy in terms of addressing the crime issue in the United States.
In fact, I must add that in San Francisco, many of the store chains such as Target and Walgreens are reducing their hours to like 5 p.m. in the evening, even during weekdays where they used to be open till 8 p.m. because of the unchecked, unbridled crime that is going on. If you remember, we had talked about this, and some of you dunderheads have said in comments that it's a fake video. It is not a fake video. It was a real video that is being used now. A person was trying to steal stuff, and he biked his way into I think it was a Walgreens on Post and Fell or something like that in San Francisco. He goes in and he steals whatever he wants into a black garbage bag, and the security guy is trying to stop him. He just knocks him and then just keeps going. And the state said that you cannot prosecute someone for crimes of theft less than $900. Ridiculous. So San Francisco is not very far behind New York, sir, and I'm very, very sorry to see this state of affairs, and I have nothing but place the blame at the feet of the Biden administration. These guys have let their progressive wing run amok. I don't know what kind of coffee they drink, what kind of tea they drink, and what kind of a cigarette they smoke, but it's all wrong. They really, really need to do an attitude adjust. This great country of ours is actually going to hell in a handbasket. And let's move on. Texas joins 21 other states in asking Supreme Court to protect Second Amendment. So a little bit more on what the Second Amendment here is in question that Texas is asking, sir.
So Texas and 20 Arizona, what you call Arizona, Kansas, Missouri, Nashville. Missouri, Minneapolis. Which are the other Idaho? So several of the Wisconsin, several of these Republican states, Florida, several of the red states are asking for the right to carry guns with permission and license, with a right to defend themselves. They believe that withdrawing that is withdrawing the Second Amendment, which is giving the right to a citizen to self-defense and protect himself from any kind of catastrophe that he faces. Right? Obviously, if he uses it not in self-defense but for offense purposes, then the law enforcement takes place. So they're saying that all these things that Biden administration is bringing basically violates the constitutional Second Amendment, which is what the red states are saying. Okay, so Texas has now joined in lieu of all the things that's happening in Texas in its southern borders, right? You saw that one of the other things that the Texas Attorney General as well as the Texas Governor, Mr. Abbott, had proclaimed is that those who are living in the border states, where you find your property is damaged, where you find criminal incidents have happened, please come forward and report so we can appropriately deal with the situation. So in conjunction with this, Texas is saying, you cannot violate the Second Amendment. So they've taken it right to the Supreme Court.
Now, Pennsylvania Republicans are thinking of an Arizona-like election probe. So first off, the election-like probe of Arizona, especially the Maricopa County, was entrusted to a company in Florida. But we don't know what happened after that, sir. Perhaps if you have an update for what is playing out on that thing and what is now leading other states to consider doing something similar, that would be most helpful.
No, let me first finish the Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania has indicated that especially the Republican or the GOP Senate members, that they must conduct an independent probe to determine not to change the course of the elections, but to make sure that the practices and policies that are put in place preserves the integrity of the elections. They say that if the state is not going to fund, they have taken permission, they have taken legal reviews, whether privately funded GOP effort can conduct a similar type of audit in Pennsylvania to retune its election policies and principles. You go back to Pennsylvania or maybe read snippets of whenever the Sree Iyer's book gets released on Who Turned My State Purple, then you may get some glimpses of what happened in terms of the drama that prevailed in Pennsylvania. But so this is what they're trying to fix. What is the Maricopa, where it happened? They have clearly established that there were several issues, including the voter ID validation. They identified these gaps that they picked up, that there was issues in Maricopa County, right? So that has been addressed. There is still an item which is namely, there are, I don't know, the number is anything between 145 to 200,000 missing ballots. What has happened to it and what needs to be done around that, that remains a part of the probe that has not been completed. And then there is a what you call battle going on between the Maricopa County and these election audit officials in the state Supreme Court in determining whether they're entitled to provide this data or not entitled to provide this data. That battle is still going on. But prima facie, the Arizona has determined that there were gaps and there were issues in the conduct and the process of the elections and preserving the integrity. Remember, Maricopa County was the subject matter of big contention. And there is a good sprinkle of our liberal friends who have different views on what the elections ought to be.
And Keystone XL pipeline developer seeks $15 billion damages from the government for cancellation of the project. Yeah, some of the money that Bidens have made from all their deals in Ukraine. Perhaps they can set it aside for covering this. Otherwise, why should the taxpayer be putting it? So that is my thought. Your thoughts?
I think I have just a simple response to this. The WTI Brent crude is around $77, very close to getting to that $80. The Brent is around 76 plus. So therefore, we started around 45, 50. We have come to 76. What we have done in the United States, we have cut off our supplies. So we are now going to be left to the vagaries of the imports that we need to do from the countries. We are no longer going to be self-sufficient. We cannot pull from the reserves. So one of the great benefits that the United States enjoyed over the last 4 years is going away. On top of it, there is a battle going on between UAE, Saudi and Russia. So we are in for trouble as far as the gas prices are concerned. As far as Keystone Pipeline is concerned, it was just abrupt termination of the decision. If you don't terminate Keystone Pipeline, we're going to have floods. We are going to have climate changes. We are going to have a whole range of stuff that's going to engulf us. So therefore, we have to cancel. But when you cancel something, you have a price to pay, and I'm sure that they are with. We can borrow because we don't need to repay. It just becomes another number to the balance sheet. So of the government, so borrow more, and we borrow more, and we give it. $750 billion has been allocated to local governments and councils thus far. We are going to do a fireside chat only to focus on COVID allocation of data, of numbers, both at the Fed level, which goes into the money supply, and the second into the various costs allocation, how much has been spent, and what's the outcome that's going to come out. And we have more coming in the next 3 years of the budget.
And now let's take a look at some India news. PM Modi holds meeting with Amit Shah and BJP General Secretary BL Santosh in what is being viewed as final touches prior to cabinet expansion. It is slated to take place on the 8th of July. We will keep you posted on that. Personally, I think he needs to fire a lot of his babus, but that's just me, sir. Your thoughts?
I think I agree with you on this, which is namely that he needs to bring some technocrats. There's a very good, I'm sure Sree Iyer ji has published a few pieces on this in PGurus. Then I think one of the other pieces that I saw 2 days ago is, one of our members who comes on our channel, TB Mohan Das Bhai, he said it's time to bring technocrats, bring people with expertise in banking, bring people with expertise in IT, bring people with expertise in manufacturing. So you need technocrats helping many of the ministers in the transformative agenda that you are in. It's not a linear jump from $3 trillion to $5 trillion. You really need competencies. And if I have to address your point, which is namely, follow the same pattern that United States follows. US brings a lot of technocrats from outside the industry into the administration to help the political, the politicians to have a better governance and better orchestration of the program. So I think that is, Mohan Das Bhai has recommended quite a few names, which if you read the article, it's at News 18. I think it was published. You can see it. I think the next one, Nandan Nilikeni, is a very good move. I believe that coming into the governance process of the digital ecosystem.
And you read my next news item, so I'll just go on. He is going to be joining a government panel as a digital expert. He's going to be looking at open digital networks, digitizing of value chains, and enhancing values. These are the main objectives. So one thing that I can tell you, having interacted with India for almost half of my lifetime, there is an active pushback from people of your age and my age to learn new things about computers. If you don't learn, you're obsolete. Please remember, to those of you curmudgeons, and I used to include myself as one of those until I saw the light, please understand, knowledge is doubling itself every 18 months. Students who are going into college are coming out obsolete. That is how quickly technology is changing. And you still want to not use a new computer. Your smartphone is actually more powerful than your laptop. Please consider changing it every year. Every year. Because that's the kind of power and alacrity you need to stay and keep up with the Shastris and the Sharmas. That's all I have to say, sir. Let's take a quick look at what's happening with Twitter. Twitter failed to comply with new IT rules, Center tells Delhi High Court. There's an article about this in PGurus. Just wait and watch. And I think this is all one by one, step by step, bit by bit. It's a drip treatment for Twitter. My guess is that it is going to be banned in India. Let's see how it goes. So, your thoughts?
I think that this is, let me add another dimension to this. There's a systematic approach that India has taken in dealing with what I call as the progressive offensive machines or machinery. The progressive offensive machineries are the technology platforms. The technology platforms yield a power which is disproportionate to any non-governmental agency deals with the present Biden administration. So anything that India does, immediately you are going to see some repercussions, be it on the taxation side, be it on the enforcement side. So I think India is adopting a policy keeping in mind the sensitivities and what could come from the United States. Some of these things, for example, India is dependent for a couple of its, at least one of its vaccines, critical API ingredients. India seems to have, based on what I'm reading, seems to have overcome that and not reliant on United States. Once India feels that if there is a catastrophic reaction from the US government, it can deal with it, then you will see rapid acceleration towards the enforcement of rules within India. And I think that's where we are heading with Twitter. Twitter is the unofficial, Twitter is very, very big donor to the Democratic Party, and they are the presiding party in power. Whereas people like Facebook and Google, yes, they have influence, but they seem to be far more compliant. Google was the first one which said it will be compliant. Facebook said it will take its rules. But the only one which seems to be defiant is Twitter, right? As Sree rightly pointed out, one by one, things are being, checkmated. And eventually, I feel that there will be an enforcement.
India's services sector slumps fastest in 11 months in June, as per PMI. The Indian Services Business Activity Index fell from 46.4 in May to 41.2 in June. India engages in quiet covaxin diplomacy, likely to get approval from several countries in the next 2 months. India will be offering under One Earth, One Health, the COVID digital platform for the management of COVID to all countries. They made that code as open source. In fact, there's an article in PGurus again explaining this. Moderna vaccine likely to reach India this week and will be the 4th vaccine. Mumbai-based Cipla has been granted the permission. Now, I'm going to just read because we are running a little late, sir. Indian COVID update tracker, vaccines, active cases, scorecard, etc. With your permission, I will put up that thing, sir. Let's take a look at the number of cases. I have the graphic up, sir. Please go ahead.
Yes, let me pick up the same diagrams that you have. I think one of the first charts is around which you will see is the co-win, the dashboard. Roughly, it shows 352 million people have been vaccinated, of which you notice that there is close to 287 million have received a dose 1, and 64 million people have received dose 2. Roughly translates to about 20% according to the estimates that is given. 20% or 21% of the people have been vaccinated, of which about 16 or 17% of the people have got one vaccine, and then about less than 3% or less than 4% have got the vaccine 2. That's the first set of data that you are seeing. The second data that you are seeing is the most important number here is that India has overcome the active cases. The active cases is around 420 to 440,000 number. Once upon a time, it was 10 times this number when wave 2 was rampaging across India. So they've also been able to contain the active cases, daily active cases. The daily active cases are coming down or negative in number. That's again a reflection that India is slowly coming out of wave 2 and probably preparing themselves very well with the acceleration of vaccines. So that's the second chart. The third chart is the number of vaccines, India, you can see, is number one in vaccinated country in the world. United States is number two. But this is total vaccines, not the total vaccines relative to a percentage of population. When you look at the total vaccines relative to the percentage of population, countries like UAE, United Kingdom top. The reason why UK is very confident is the percentage of people vaccinated with two vaccines is 50%, and the percentage of people who have totally been vaccinated with at least one dose of vaccine is around 67, 70%. And this is what gives UK the confidence to do what it is doing in terms of opening up or loosening the rules.
If you will just give me 1 second, sir, I have to do some cleanup here, and let's move on. And now we'll take a look at the markets. And in markets, we have some amazing developments. The average wage earnings increased 3.6% in June, and this is higher than the trend before the pandemic. Surveys indicate that pay increases and benefits are tools to lure workers back in. So, market is galloping. We know that all indices are up 15 to 16% or somewhere in thereabouts. And now what is happening is many have money in their pockets and they are now looking up and down, looking at the weather, trying to say, should I go, should I not go? And this is going to turn hopefully sooner rather than later, because otherwise you'll have inflation plus you'll have a fall in productivity. But my primary question, sir, is that why are many Americans still reluctant to take their vaccination shots?
This is just not American. I just spoke with few people in Australia and few in Asia. There is a considerable reluctance and suspicion. Whether the suspicion is created by adverse press that is coming out is becoming a barrier and fear. And all this comes from lack of trust and lack of credibility that from the governmental agencies which have dealt with the COVID situation right from day one. Almost making it non-existent to turning it into a pandemic. And then the political battle that took place between various parties, depending on which country you are in, between left, right, and center on vaccination, the effectiveness of vaccination, wearing masks versus not wearing masks, doctors not coming out and being allowed to come out and speak in a much more transparent manner. All this is creating suspicion in the minds of the people. I don't want to inject something into my body that I don't know what it will do to me. Now, I control my body, so therefore it's better for me to deal with it on a natural, combative way and basically address it as it comes. This is the feedback that is coming through, which is that we don't trust the doctors, we don't trust. And by the way, these vaccines have been rushed into the market with not adequate testing that has taken place, and we are the guinea pigs for the test. Now, I'm not suggesting I'm vaccinated. I have two vaccines. I've also suffered, COVID situation, and I've dealt with various protocols to address myself. So, I'm a vaccine supporter, but I'm just trying to tell you that this is the feedback talking to people. For example, U.S. Army says quite a large number of people have stated that there should not be a mandate to vaccinate, compulsorily vaccinate. Australian Army, some of the Army people of other countries. So there seems to be this suspicion that this is not field tested. There's a lot of collateral consequences. And there's also, why should I trust the people who have misled me right throughout? This is the sentiment that is blocking people from taking vaccine. It's based on just some of I've not conducted a survey of 10,000 people. I've just maybe spoken to about 20, 30, 40 families. And this is the feedback that we're getting.
And hackers demand over 70 million to restore data held by the companies hit in the cyber attack. The number, I believe, is around 200 companies. This is still not resolved. FBI has not been able to crack it down. I don't know if FBI is the one that's responsible for that. However, Biden administration is certainly responsible for this, because these are all American companies. And let's see how this thing plays out. Sir, we will touch upon this maybe tomorrow because we are out of time today. And thanks for joining, viewers. And we'll be back again tomorrow, bright and early. Thanks for joining again. Namaskar.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day. Namaskar.